I sat in tears as I read about the recent passing of a beautiful soul named Pastor Jared Wilson, a public advocate for mental health and suicide prevention within faith communities around the world, took his own life this past month. I'm filled with gratitude and amazement that someone with such a deep personal story opened up his life so that others might find hope. You see, for almost all of my life, I've been a person of faith and attended church. I don't attend church because I think I'm better than those who don't. It's actually because of how much I realize my need for something greater in my life. I must say, my response to reading the story about Jared was a bit strange. As I sat there in tears, I sensed that it was finally time. It was time for me to share something about myself that has been inside for as long as I can remember. Something that is called sleepless nights, heartbreak, and more pain than I ever knew existed. I remember in my early teenage years thinking, I will die old without anyone ever knowing this secret about me. You can explain it in a lot of different ways, but I'll just say for as long as I can remember, I've had an attraction to the same sex. I wish I could adequately put into words how dark and painful a place like this can feel, especially as a teenager growing up in a world where this was not as accepted as it is today. If you've personally felt that you've carried a secret, or this one in particular, you know exactly how I feel. Up until 20 years old, for the most part, I kept these thoughts and feelings about my sexuality to myself. The thoughts and temptations surrounding my sexuality caused me to leave my faith. You see, it was my doubts about God, like, why am I this way, or I don't understand this, so I don't trust you, that pushed me to walk away and leave the church I called home. No matter what age you are, if you have secrets or thoughts that cause you pain, you need to open up to a counselor, friend, or pastor today. I truly believe one of my biggest regrets in my teenage years was that I tried to hold everything in by myself. All of my curiosities and doubts regarding my sexuality were made very clear when, after a few months, a friendship unexpectedly turned into a relationship. I not only left the church, but I began to isolate myself from so many friends, mentors, and leaders in my life. I began to reject any person or thing that I believed didn't accept me in this stage of life. You see, you'll begin to believe things about yourself in isolation that you would never consider in the midst of community. You believe that you're not good enough, that something's wrong with you, and even at times question your existence. I had never acted on any of these same-sex feelings or thoughts up until I was 22 years old. I've told many people this, but I believe my distance from God caused more problems than my actions did. At the end of this 2 years of running from God, I realized how I'd become a totally different person. I wasn't as patient, kind, loving, or generous as I once was when I had a moral compass or faith in my life. If I hurt you, didn't respond to messages, or pushed you away during this time, know that it was not you, it was me. I love the quote, hurt people, and through this time I was definitely hurting. Have you ever lost a close family member and some people in your life just didn't know what to say, so they said nothing? I would explain this as a similar feeling when most people in your life find out about your sexuality. Although everyone finds out, for the most part you still feel alone. This might offend some of you, or you may not agree with me, and I'm okay with that. But I titled this blog post Being Gay and Loving God because I want to make one thing very clear. When I came back to God and got baptized in 2018, my same-sex attraction didn't magically disappear. This is an important truth because it shows so many people, specifically in the LGBTQ community, that God not only loves them, but that He's longing to know them. If all my homosexual feelings disappeared, it would almost say to those searching that they have to be good enough to meet God. That in itself goes against everything we believe about grace and the life that Jesus lived. Now, some of you may be reading this who don't practice any type of faith or religion, and I'm thankful you're here too. I specifically wanted those who do feel that faith is a part of their life to know that the choice to still talk to God is available to them no matter where they are. We see throughout Scripture that oftentimes Jesus ran to the places and groups that the church ran from. I also want to be very clear that God does change us for the better when we choose to open our lives up to Him. I think for far too long, religious people have tried to define what change should be and how quickly that change should take place. I believe for me to instantly have become a totally different person, to deny or remove all realities of my sexuality once I came to God, would make me irrelevant to the very people He's called me to love. To take steps towards God in the midst of any situation is to simply say, God, I want you more. I realize at this place in my life that my sexuality is not a choice, but following Jesus is. Do I walk around carrying a specific title under the LGBTQ covering? I don't. But I did want to share the title of this blog post to show that many of the feelings that would categorize me as gay didn't go away when I returned to the faith. The world is always attempting to name us, put us in a box. We're not rich, poor, gay, or straight in His eyes. I believe with our Father, He simply calls us His, and that truth is such a beautiful thing. I do not claim to have all the answers for how the church and the LGBTQ community can find common ground, but I do know that for those that practice faith and also carry some type of homosexual tendency, this can feel like a very scary divide. I feel that oftentimes some churches don't know what to say, so they just don't say anything at all. And with the attacks and hostility, I can't say I blame either side for resistance. I know that so many LGBTQ people have been hurt by the church's handling of those within their communities. People of all ages have been put through absurd versions of camps, therapies, crazy things, none of which I condone. But just because people have gotten it wrong does not mean that is a reflection of God's heart. Our natural reaction in faith communities is to reject an issue and the person that carries it. If you've read anything about the life of Jesus, you know his ability to see past what others couldn't and speak to the heart of a person. Please know that I am still on a journey. And the only thing I can commit to you is that I'm going to stay as open as I can be on this journey. I'm going to stay as open and vulnerable as I can for the teenage girl who's bullied and feels like she's living in a body that doesn't belong to her. For the college student whose parents threw their belongings in the yard and no longer speak to them since coming out. For the person who already deals with mental illness, in addition to the social pressures surrounding their sexuality. For the person who desires to cling to their faith they've known their entire life, but feel that their sexuality disqualifies them. I will unapologetically open myself to the criticism of people whom I do not know, if it means I can offer hope to someone that feels alone and without support. LGBTQ youth are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than heterosexual youth, and so staying silent simply isn't an option for me anymore. It's pretty obvious that in today's climate, the best way to make everyone happy is to just stay silent. Know that it is a choice for me to share my personal thoughts, so I hope you give me the same grace that you would want for yourself. This is my personal story, and I'm not forcing it or the contents upon anyone. But I go back to the very words I spoke about Pastor Jared Wilson. I hope that this can one day be said of us in the same way that it's said about him. Someone with such a deep personal story opened up his life so that others might find hope. If you can relate to my story at all, know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you're most definitely loved. No matter where you go or what you do, you will always have a home at the cross. Thanks so much for watching. Leave your thoughts or questions in the comment section below and I'll reply to each one of them. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more videos on faith, creativity, and entrepreneurship.